Olá, seja muito bem-vindo. Eu sou o Duda Teixeira e esse é mais um Cruzoé Entrevistas. Hoje temos como convidado o Hillel Neuer. O Hillel, ele é advogado canadense e é o diretor-executivo da ONG UN Watch. Essa ONG fica em Genebra, na Suíça, e o objetivo é estar sempre monitorando tudo o que acontece dentro da ONU em relação a direitos humanos. Então, vamos conversar com o Hillel, principalmente sobre o que está acontecendo aí no Oriente Médio e em Israel. Eu vou falar com ele em inglês, vocês seguem a legenda aí embaixo. Hi, Hillel. Good afternoon. You are in Geneva, right?
Right now, I'm visiting Jerusalem, actually.
Good. So in Israel. So, Hillel, I've prepared some questions for you. And on Monday, we had a message from the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, which is known as UNRA in English. They've published a message on social media saying Hamas stole fuel and medical supplies meant for refugees. Should we trust this message?
I think we can trust this message. You know, in law, if someone makes an admission that is contrary to their interests, that has a particular weight. So in this case, well, I would say two things. Number one, it's very rare, it's almost never happens, that UNRWA reports a crime committed by Hamas. And we know why that is, because 2 years ago, for example, when there was a war, a battle between Hamas and Israel, the head of UNRWA in Gaza, a German citizen by the name of Matthias Schmel, he was interviewed by an international TV network, and he was asked about Israel's strikes on Gaza, and he said, quote, "They are very precise," by which he meant they were targeting Hamas, and they were not targeting civilians or humanitarian spaces or schools. He said they were very precise, and he got in a lot of trouble with Hamas. They declared him persona non grata in Gaza, and very quickly he was actually removed from his position. So Hamas was able to kick this guy out of his job and out of Gaza. And therefore, the people who work for UNRWA, if they're not already very anti-Israel and sympathetic with the goals of Hamas, they would be afraid. And that's why, again, about this tweet, UNRWA did a detailed tweet. It was 3 parts. And they said that Hamas stole, using its quote-unquote Ministry of Health, which is run by Hamas, that they came with trucks and they stole fuel and medical equipment. And they gave a lot of details. And then about 2 hours later, or maybe less, they deleted the tweet and sort of pretended it never happened. So multiple sources have confirmed that the theft did happen.
Hillel, but usually, how are the relations between the UNRWA and Hamas?
Well, they seem to get along very well. They have a modus vivendi. Nothing can happen in Gaza without the approval of Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. They have totalitarian, oppressive rule over all of Gaza. If you say something, do something that is contrary to Hamas, you get arrested and tortured. So Hamas is very happy for UNRWA to worry about feeding Palestinians, putting the kids in school, taking out the garbage. And Hamas is worried about building terror tunnels and planning to massacre Israeli civilians as they did on October 7th. So they seem to get along just fine.
Okay, Hillel, is the UNRWA to blame for the endless tensions between Israel and the Palestinians in West Bank and in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I don't know if we can blame one agency. I think we can blame the commitment that Palestinians still have to eliminating any Jewish state whatsoever in this area. They're not willing to compromise. Their vision is not to have a Palestinian state living side by side with Israel, but is to eliminate the Jewish state. That has always been the declared goal, not only of Hamas, but also if you really speak to Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, and you see what they write in their internal communications and their publications and their messages to their people, they are also committed to destroying Israel. I would say that is the cause. Well, UNRWA is an instrument that promotes that cause. UNRWA is different than any other refugee agency. You know, in Geneva, our offices are next to the UN refugee agency that's called the UNHCR. And that agency is supposed to deal with millions of refugees around the world. And their goal is to take people who are refugees, if they're from Syria or Afghanistan or Ukraine, and make them not refugees, to settle them in some third country. UNRWA does not have that goal. They're not trying to resettle Palestinians in Brazil and Canada or in Europe or anywhere else. Their goal is actually, they teach Palestinians that their home is not in Gaza or in the West Bank. Their home is within Israel proper, in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem and in Haifa. So UNRWA for generations has been maintaining, cultivating a culture of grievance, not allowing the Palestinians to move on. There was a war in 1947 and 48. It was the Palestinians and the Arab states that launched the war. They lost, and they need to move on. They've been given autonomy in Gaza and large parts of the West Bank, and they were accepted in neighboring Arab Muslim countries like Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. They can move on and create a new life. But UNRWA is designed to sustain the grievance over the 1948 war and effectively to promote a narrative that their home is within Israel proper and to undo Israel. That's what UNRWA promotes.
Okay, Hillel, what did you find analyzing social media posts of UNRWA teachers? Can you give us some examples?
Yes, look, we for the past several years have been examining the teachers that UNRWA hires. And I think, you know, if you look at who the teacher is in the classroom, you can understand what kind of education the kids will be getting. And we found in the past over 133 documented examples of UNRWA teachers and other staff who promote glorification of terrorism, who cheer whenever there's a Hamas terrorist attack, who praise Adolf Hitler, who say Adolf Hitler did a great job, he should have finished. They call for killing Jews. They promote anti-Semitic conspiracies. And on our website, unwatch.org, last week, we released images, screenshots, and links of UNRWA staff who cheered the massacre that took place on October 7th when Hamas murdered 1,400 Israelis, slaughtering families, raping, torturing, taking hostages, about 200 hostages. And these UNRWA teachers were praising these massacres, and they're going before a classroom, and we're paying for it. Taxpayers around the world are paying for it. If people want to see the examples, they can go to unwatch.org and they can see our blog post about this. It shows pictures of UNRWA teachers, principals, and other staff. It's quite horrible.
Okay. Hello. So we are recording this interview on Wednesday. And yesterday, on Tuesday, a rocket from the Islamic Jihad, which is another terrorist group, reached a parking lot close to a hospital in the Gaza Strip. And most media outlets published pieces saying Israel bombarded a hospital, killing hundreds. So I ask you, how do you analyze the media coverage about this war?
Look, this example is a shocking, extreme example of a phenomenon that's been going on for many, many years. The media, the mainstream media in general, not everyone, but in general, covering the conflict between Israel and the Arab states and the Palestinians have a very defined narrative. The narrative isn't about Israel and the Arab world or Israel and Iran. They take a vast region that goes from Morocco in the west to, let's say, Iran in the east, the Islamic world, Middle East, if you want to include Pakistan, but let's say the Arab world and Iran, and they shrink it to a tiny area of just, their focus is just on Israel and the Palestinians to make Israel look like the larger party when Israel is actually surrounded in a sea of tens of millions of square kilometers of Arab land and outnumbered by hundreds of millions. They focus on a narrow area, which is just Israel and the Palestinians, to make Israel look larger and to make Israel as the aggressor. And the story, the narrative that is already there, and they're just waiting for the facts to fill it in. They have the narrative, is Israel kills innocent Palestinians. That's the narrative that the major media worldwide tend to be looking for. And we saw it yesterday. Hamas told a story, which was a lie. And the New York Times, the world's leading newspaper, we rely on the New York Times to do independent verification to get the facts, ran with the headline, Israeli strike on Gaza hospital kills hundreds, Palestinian officials say. So it's not even Hamas says, but Palestinian officials, which sounds more credible. And they put it as a headline story. It turns out it's false. As you said, the rocket was from the Islamic Jihad. They were firing it on Israel. It fell short and it landed within Gaza, which happens many times. And the story was covered around the world. AP, Reuters, world leaders condemned Israel, said we need accountability, and it was all a lie from Hamas. So it gives us an indication that the war that has begun and where Israel will likely be entering the Gaza Strip, we can expect to see this every day, where facts won't necessarily be checked, and you're just going to get headlines. And the headline clearly that they're looking for, and we saw it today, is Israel kills innocent Palestinians. That's the story we're looking for. And we're not going to get nuance of whether terrorists were firing from that area. You're going to get the story that Israel deliberately targets civilians, which is a big lie. Israel is trying to target the terrorists and is doing its best to avoid targeting civilians. Of course, because Hamas hides under homes, hospitals, and schools, inevitably civilians, because of Hamas's actions, will get injured, and that is tragic.
Hillel, why is it so difficult to change this narrative on the mainstream media?
Well, that's a very good question. And, some would look at narratives that have memes that have been cultivated over hundreds of years. In the past millennia, there was a constant meme in Western society that the Jews killed Christ, that the Jews killed an innocent baby. In Europe, you would have the blood libel repeatedly. It was a story that just kept popping up every century. It would be a dead child, and they'd say the Jews killed him to have their blood. And so I think in Christian society, also in Islamic society, because of their religions, which come from Judaism, and some of the anti-Semitism that is rooted in there, it's something that's rooted in attitudes for hundreds of years, and I'd say it's even unconscious. Many people are not even aware of it. And even though society today is largely secular, the idea of the Jews killing an innocent person, and there's blood, and that passion that comes with it, seems to be an ever-present need that our societies still have, to go for this scapegoating and to get this rage because there's blood. That's something that we see very starkly today, and I think it echoes from things that we've had in the past in our culture.
Okay. Hello, this week, the Workers' Party, which is the party of Lula, they've published a statement saying that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza. Is there evidence of it?
No evidence has been put forward. On the contrary, Israel was attacked on October 7th. Israelis were sleeping, Palestinians were sleeping, and Hamas sent in 6,000 terrorists. We don't know the exact numbers, but they broke through into Israel. They invaded. They went into communities, to homes. They killed whole families. They raped women. They killed people at a music festival. This was the war crime. Israel has begun to respond to try to hit back at the terrorists so that they won't do it again. So what the Workers' Party in Brazil has said is a complete distortion. Israel is a democracy trying to defend itself from atrocities, Nazi-like atrocities from the terrorist group Hamas. And it has every right to defend itself. When there was ISIS, the Islamic State, in Western countries in 2014, America launched bombings against ISIS. This was the United States, Australia, Belgium, Denmark, Canada, the Netherlands, France, Britain, and the whole world supported it. And the whole world should support Israel in its fight against terrorists. That is its moral duty to defend its citizens, and it is the opposite of a war crime. So it's a shame on the Workers' Party for supporting the narrative of Hamas terrorists.
Okay, Hillel, but it's happening in many other countries where we have leftist parties blaming Israel for the war and for the atrocities, right? Why are there so many leftist parties anti-Israel in the world?
Well, look, anti-Semitism exists on the right and it exists on the left. And left-wing anti-Semitism has been there for, centuries. In Karl Marx, there is terrible anti-Semitism. He equates Judaism with, exploitation. And over the years, we've had many left-wing ideologues who were anti-Semitic. The Stalinist Soviet Union, which was the largest left-wing power of the 20th century, was horribly anti-Semitic and promoted the modern form of anti-Semitism, which is that Zionism is racism, that Israel is some kind of a Nazi-like state. This was promoted by the communist regime in the Soviet Union, and it, filtered in to radical left and sometimes even more mainstream left-wing organizations, publications, and attitudes in the West. So there is a long history to this demonization of Israel, which I believe is the contemporary manifestation of anti-Semitism. If the country you're singling out and demonizing continuously is the Jewish state, in a treatment that you apply to no other country in the world, that's called discrimination, and it's called anti-Semitism.
Okay. Hillel, these days, the Brazilian president, Lula, posted a message saying that Brazil, in the provisional presidency of the UN Security Council, will join the efforts to bring the conflict to an immediate and definitive end. How do you see the role of the UN Security Council in this crisis, and how do you see the Brazilian presidency there?
Well, the UN Security Council is going to be deadlocked on this issue. The United States is supporting Israel. That is correct. Russia and China basically support Hamas in one form or other. So you're not going to get, and because they have the veto power, you're never going to get a resolution that will decide anything in this conflict. You will get meetings. You may, on some rare occasions, get a joint statement of criticism of one of the other parties, but you're not going to get consensus. We saw it even after Israel was attacked. They couldn't reach a consensus press release even after Israelis, men, women, and children were slaughtered. So I don't think the Security Council will do more than hold meetings, which are important. It's a way of spotlighting a situation. Brazil will have presidency for a month. I don't think they will have a significant influence on the process. And I don't think people respect Lula. I think people know that he's a left-wing ideologue. He was a comrade of Fidel Castro, and I think serious people do not take him seriously.
Okay. Hillel, yesterday on Tuesday, the Iranian president, Ibrahim Raisi, called Lula by phone and offered some help for Brazil to play a role in the international scene, right? What can we expect from it?
Well, I think it says a lot that the head of a terrorist, fascist, misogynistic regime like the Islamic Republic of Iran is calling Lula and asking him to intervene. That's really says it all, and it's not a very positive testimony for Lula if you have a homophobic, misogynistic, anti-Semitic regime that wants you to get involved. I'm concerned that Lula might, in his own way, give support to the Iranian regime. That would be terrible. It would be against the interests of the people of Brazil, who deserve a safe and peaceful world and will not be aided by a world that has a stronger terrorist regime like Iran or Hamas or Hezbollah. That will not serve the Brazilian people or the people around the world.
Hillel, who is not taking Lula seriously? Are you talking about?
Well, go ahead.
And are you talking about Western presidents?
Yes, largely. I'd say obviously Brazil is an important country, and Brazil has certain power and has influence in Latin America. So I don't mean to diminish the power and influence of Brazil, but I don't think that if Western leaders are gathering to discuss an issue, if it's President Biden and Macron and Prime Minister Sunak from the UK and German Chancellor, they're having a conversation, and Lula is trying something, I don't think anyone's going to of those who count in the United States and the EU in terms of major powers that count on these issues. I don't think that they're going to be interested very much in what he's doing, although he clearly has some power and influence and could cause damage. I don't dismiss that possibility.
Okay. Hillel, Brazil uses a list of terrorist entities done by the United Nations Security Council, but Hamas is not there. Why?
Well, as I indicated before, Russia and China have the veto, and so that means that the Security Council is always getting filtered through some of those dictatorships, and in part because of their influence and other countries that are on the Security Council, Hamas has not been listed. So I think anyone who wants to do a real terrorist list should do their own, like the United States, like the European Union, like Canada, and not rely on a UN which needs the approval of Beijing and Moscow, Putin and President Xi, in order to put someone on a list. I think any self-respecting democracy ought to have their own list.
So Brazil now should start its own list of terrorist entities, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And Hilo, the Brazilian government under Lula is supporting a reform of the United Nations Security Council. Can a reform of the kind that Brazil is asking for change something at the UN for good?
I don't think it's very likely. I don't think you're going to get agreement if in each region, if you say, give one country, an additional country, the veto power. If you say, all right, well, let's give South Africa the veto power in Africa. Well, Nigeria will say, what about us? And if you say Brazil, we're going to give it, Argentina can say, what about us? And Mexico. So I think it'll be very complicated to get any reform. Reform is always talked about, but I don't think it's very likely. I don't think the chances are good for any reform.
Okay. Hilo, you are a strong critic of most of the dictatorships around the world. Can I consider you as the most hated man at the UN in Geneva?
Sadly, that's been proven true time and again. When I walk into the UN, I receive enormous attitudes of hatred. And as we know, I've been targeted by the top UN Human Rights Council official, Eric Tistounet, who has prevented me from speaking in last June in 36 occasions when we registered to speak. We were denied. So we know that he hates us. His employee testified how he targets us. We have emails from Eric Tistounet, how he plots ways to have UN security block me from entering the UN, and how he told his staff to upload false information about me to try to smear me on the internet. So there's no question, sadly, I say, because it's not fun, that I am the most hated man at the United Nations.
Okay, so I suppose they are not inviting you for parties or lunches or dinners in Geneva, but if you come to Brazil, please tell me. I will invite you for a party or something here, okay?
Obrigado. Thank you.
Hilo, very thank you for your time. I love your explanations. Bom, eu acabei de conversar aqui com o Hillel Neuer, diretor-executivo da ONG UN Watch. Eu recomendo muito que vocês sigam também as contas da UN Watch e do próprio Hillel nas redes sociais. Hillel, very thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.